Hello students, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm gonna teach you class 10 chapter 6 life processes second part. In my previous video I have taught you life processes first part, which is termed as nutrition, and today I'm gonna teach you its second part, which is termed as respiration. So let's get started. So respiration is a complex process which includes first breathing, in the sense the mechanism of exchange of gases, that is oxygen and carbon dioxide. The main gases which are exchanged in breathing are oxygen and carbon dioxide, O2 and CO2. Second, breakdown of food in cells to release energy, in the sense cellular respiration. So this is a very good question, that what is cellular respiration? Breakdown of food in cells to release energy. It is breakdown of food inside the cells to release energy. Now, respiration is a biochemical process which takes place in mitochondria. Is fourth, it takes place on several steps and requires several enzymes. The energy released is chemical energy, which is stored in form of ATP, adenosine triphosphate. You must learn the full form of ATP, which is adenosine triphosphate. Now, mainly there are two types of respiration: aerobic and anaerobic respiration. Respiration that takes place in presence of oxygen is called aerobic respiration. In this, glucose, which is a 6-carbon compound, is completely broken down into carbon dioxide and water by the process of oxidation. This results in the production of ATP. Once again, respiration that takes place in presence of oxygen is called aerobic respiration. In this, glucose 6-carbon molecule 6-carbon compound is completely broken down into CO2 and water by the process of oxidation. This results in the production of ATP. Now, this is a reaction involved. Glucose, which is 6-carbon compound, in cytoplasm. Here, glucose gets converted into pyruvate, which is 3-carbon compound in cytoplasm. Here, no O2 is required. Now, pyruvate get converted into CO2 plus H2O plus energy. It gets converted into CO2 plus H2O plus energy, and this takes place in mitochondria, and it takes place in the presence of oxygen. This when pyruvate, which is 3-carbon compound, is converted into CO2 plus H2O plus energy. This is called Krebs cycle, and here electron transport chain happens. Now, respiration that takes place in the absence of oxygen is called anaerobic respiration. In animals, during vigorous muscular activity, there is a lack of oxygen in our muscles, and then causes anaerobic respiration, in which lactic acid and energy is released, and lactic acid causes cramps in our muscles. Now, the reaction involved is glucose. In cytoplasm, glucose, we know that it is 6-carbon molecule. In cytoplasm, it gets converted into pyruvate. Now, pyruvate gets converted into lactic acid plus energy. Here, pyruvate gets converted into lactic acid and energy when there is a lack of O2, and this happens in muscle cells. Now, in certain bacteria and yeast, energy is released in the absence of oxygen, in which ethanol, alcohol, and CO2 is produced. This process is called fermentation. Once more, in certain bacteria and yeast, energy is released in the absence of oxygen, in which ethanol, alcohol, and CO2 is produced. This process is called fermentation. The enzyme which is responsible for this process, which is known as fermentation, is zymase. Now, the release of energy in aerobic respiration is greater than anaerobic respiration, because there is oxygen in aerobic respiration. It is obvious that in which oxygen is involved in the reaction, there will be more energy, and in which oxygen is not involved, there is much less energy than where oxygen is involved. So it is written here also, the release of energy in aerobic respiration is greater than anaerobic respiration, because there is oxygen in aerobic respiration. Now, you must learn this cycle, that glucose 6-carbon molecule in cytoplasm turns to pyruvate 3-carbon molecule. Now, in absence of O2, it means in where O2 is present in negligible form. Here in yeast, at absence of O2, this pyruvate gets converted into ethanol and plus CO2 plus energy. And here this pyruvate gets converted into lactic acid plus energy when there is a lack of O2, and it gets converted into from pyruvate to lactic acid in our muscle cells. Now here now at last the reaction where O2 is present, here pyruvate is get converted into CO2 plus H2O plus energy. I am gonna tell you one more information that when pyruvate is get converted into CO2 plus H2O plus energy in the presence of O2, here 38 ATP energy is released, and where it is get converted into ethanol plus CO2 plus energy in the absence of O2, here 2 ATP energy is only 2 ATP energy is released. Now respiration in plants is also involves exchange of respiratory gases, in this sense O2 and CO2 in stomata. You must learn these two gases, O2 and CO2. These are called respiratory gases, O2 and CO2. Now roots of plant take up oxygen between the soil particles through the process of diffusion. Roots of plant take up oxygen between the soil particles through the process of diffusion. Large intercellular spaces are present so that all the cells are in contact with air. CO2 plus O2 exchanges through diffusion. Diffusion depends on environmental conditions and requirement of the cells. All night CO2 is eliminated because photosynthesis is not taking place. All night CO2 is eliminated because photosynthesis is not taking place. During daytime CO2 is taken up and only O2 is released. You must learn the sentence that all night CO2 is eliminated because photosynthesis is not taking place at that time, but in daytime CO2 is taken up and only O2 is released. Now respiration in animals. It's obvious that different animals have different organs for the uptake of oxygen and getting rid of carbon dioxide. Terrestrial animals have different organs and aquatic animals have different organs. Earthworms take oxygen through its skin. Amphibians take oxygen from both skin and lungs, while terrestrial animals take oxygen through their lungs. Now, blood picks up oxygen to the different tissues of the body and takes CO2, or we can say carbon dioxide, from the tissues to the skin or lungs for putting off it in surroundings. Now, in insects, air tubes and tracheae, which serves as respiratory organs. In aquatic animals, like fish, which take water from its mouth and push it out from its gills. Gills have blood capillaries through which gases can be exchanged fastly. So the respiratory organs of insects are air tubes and tracheae, and of aquatic animals are gills. Now we come to the main topic of this chapter, that is respiration in humans. Now, human respiratory system consists of various organs. These are external nostril, nasal cavity, internal nostril, pharynx, larynx and tracheae. They are the continuous passage from external environment to the lungs. Now, this is the diagram which I made. If you can't recognize this, then you can see this, which is in NCERT textbook. Now, external nostrils. Firstly, we breathe air. We breathe or take air inside from external nostril, and then air is drawn to nasal cavity from external nostril to nasal cavity. Nasal cavity is separated from oral cavity by a bony palate. Nasal cavity is separated from oral cavity by a bony palate so that we can breathe while eating. You must learn this sentence, that nasal cavity is separated from oral cavity. Nasal cavity is separated from oral cavity by a bony palate so that we can breathe while eating. Now, the dust particles are entrapped. The dust particles are entrapped in mucus in nasal cavity. Nasal cavity ends in here. Here the dust particles are entrapped in mucus in nasal cavity. Here this is the end of nasal cavity. Here nasal cavity ends in. Now air enters to internal nostril, and after internal nostril air enters to Pharynx. Now definition of pharynx is, it is a short tube located at the back of buccal cavity. Located at the back of buccal cavity. You can recognize it from this diagram also. The main function of pharynx is to provide passage into trachea through a sill-like apparatus called glottis. The main function of pharynx is to provide passage into trachea through a sill-like apparatus called glottis. While swallowing food, the glottis gets covered by epiglottis so that the food will not enter windpipe. While eating or while swallowing food, the glottis gets covered by epiglottis so that the food will not enter windpipe. Now air comes to a trachea. Trachea is also called as windpipe. It is a thin walled long tube which passes through null and ends to thoracic cavity. Now air comes to bronchi. Trachea, from this diagram you can see it. This is trachea, and it's get divided into two bronchi. Trachea divides to bronchi. In pair we say these two as bronchi, and in singular we say these as bronchus. And these two bronchus divides to each lung. Now the windpipe. The windpipe is lined with the rings of cartilage. Due to which it does not collapse when the air passes through it. Now, right bronchus is straight and short. You must learn this. Right bronchus is straight and short, while the left bronchus is slightly long and enters obliquely into the lungs. Now, these bronchi branch to form bronchioles, and these bronchioles are divided into sac-like structures called alveoli. Bronchi is lined by epithelial tissue. The walls of alveoli are thin-walled and lined by numerous blood capillaries for gases exchange. The gases are exchanged here in alveoli. And these alveoli are thin-walled and lined by numerous blood capillaries for gaseous exchange. Now here the respiration in human beings ends in. Now you must learn the mechanism of breathing. When we breathe, air from outside rushes into the alveoli of lungs. This is called inhalation. The taking of air is called inhalation. Thoracic cavity expands when the diaphragm and muscles attached to the ribs contract. Thoracic cavity is also called chest cavity. Thoracic cavity is also known as chest cavity. Now, it is second largest hollow cavity of the body. What is the second largest hollow cavity of the body? Thoracic cavity, or we can also say it as chest cavity. Now, it is enclosed by ribs, the vertebral column. It is enclosed by ribs, the vertebral column, the sternum, which is also known as breastbone, and is separated from abdominal cavity by a muscular and membranal partition called the diaphragm. Thoracic cavity is separated from abdominal cavity by a muscular and membranal partition, which we call as diaphragm. When diaphragm contracts, volume of thoracic cavity or volume of chest cavity increases and air pressure decreases, and the air pressure of thoracic cavity decreases. Therefore, air outside our body rushes to our lungs, and when diaphragm releases, thoracic cavity comes to its original size and air is pushed out. Now, blood brings CO2 from the rest of the body to alveoli. We will study this how blood brings CO2 from the rest of the body to the alveoli in our next video, in which I will cover the topic of transportation. Now, here blood brings CO2 from the rest of the body to alveoli, and oxygen and carbon dioxide is exchanged here. Carbon dioxide is exchanged here. Oxygen is taken up by the blood and taken up to the rest part of the body. Now, during breathing cycle, lungs have a residual amount of air, so the O2 and CO2 have sufficient times to be exchanged. During breathing cycle, when the breathing is going on, lungs have some amount of air, so that O2 and CO2 have sufficient time to be exchanged. Now, when body size of animal is large, diffusion pressure of air is not sufficient for the oxygen to be absorbed and carbon dioxide to be released. Once again, when body size of the animal is large, diffusion pressure of air is not sufficient for the oxygen to be absorbed and the carbon dioxide to be released from all parts of the body. This function is performed by the respiratory pigment, the take-up of oxygen from the air of the lungs and carry to tissues which are deficient of oxygen. It takes up oxygen from the air of the lungs and carry it to tissues which are deficient of oxygen. The respiratory pigment in human beings is hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is respiratory pigment in human beings. Now, here it's also written that in human beings the respiratory pigment is hemoglobin. Oxygen is transported by hemoglobin. It is present in the RBCs of blood. CO2 is more soluble in water as compared to oxygen, therefore transferred water. You must read this paragraph once again, that in humans the respiratory pigment is hemoglobin. Oxygen is transported by hemoglobin throughout the body, and hemoglobin is present in the red blood corpuscles of the blood. You will learn about RBCs, WBCs and platelets in my next video, as I've told you earlier also, that now CO2 is more soluble in water. CO2 is more soluble in water as compared to oxygen. That's why CO2 is transported by water throughout the body. Now here the respiration part also gets over. Now I have brought some questions for you from the topic respiration and nutrition. So let's do it, these questions. And first question is, what is photosynthesis and what are its products? These are most simplest questions, that what is photosynthesis and what are its products. The process through which green plants make their own food with the help of CO2, O2 and in the presence of chlorophyll and sunlight. And the reaction is 6CO2 plus 12H2 in the presence of sunlight and chlorophyll, C6H12O6, which is glucose plus 6O2 plus H2O. Its products are glucose, oxygen and water. Now, second question, what is light and dark reaction means? Reaction during photosynthesis in plants in the presence of sunlight is called light reaction. It takes place in thylakoid. It involves the trapping of sunlight of chlorophyll, conversion of light energy into chemical energy, splitting of water molecule into H plus ion is released. The reaction during photosynthesis in plants which can occur in absence of light are called dark reaction. I have told you earlier also that the reaction which takes place in the presence of light are called light reaction, and which takes place in the absence of light are called dark reactions. Now, dark reaction takes place in the stroma of chloroplast. Here, reduction of CO2 happens in this. It is light independent reaction. Now, third question, name the largest gland of human digestive system. Write about its secretion and functions. The largest gland of our digestive system is liver. Bile juice and its salts are produced in it. Bile juice makes the acidic food coming from the stomach to intestine into alkaline, because pancreatic juice works only in acidic medium. Bile also emulsifies fats into small globules, thus playing an important part in the digestion of food in human body. Fourth question, what is the role of cartilaginous rings present in trachea? The windpipe or trachea is cartilaginous with the ring-shaped cartilages, so that it will not collapse when air passes through it. Once more, the windpipe or trachea is cartilaginous with the ring-shaped cartilages, so that it will not collapse when air passes through it. Now, fifth question, where are the lungs situated in human body? Lungs are situated in thoracic cavity or chest cavity, above the abdominal cavity, inside the rib cage at the upper part of the body called chest. Here we have completed all the questions related to the topic nutrition and respiration. So if the video was helpful for you, like this video and also share this video to your friends who are in the same class as you are, in class 10th, and also Please subscribe to my channel and also press the bell icon so that you can get notified as I upload transportation part explanation. So goodbye, take care, stay home, stay safe.